Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ranking members, congressmen. It is an honor to speak with you today and give voice to the unseen, the U.S. government, AHI survivors, and their families. My name is Greg Edgreen. I stood up and led the DIA's task force, which was in charge of taking care of our survivors and determining the cause. For background, I'm not an analyst. I'm a retired Army and intelligence officer. The following are my personal opinions and do not represent the opinions of the government. Given the classification of this topic, many of my comments will have to be made at a future closed-door session. As a country, we have been here before. Most people think this all started in Havana in 2016, the widely reported Havana Syndrome. This led to the U.S. withdrawing most of its staff and ending rapprochement between Havana and Washington. But before Havana Syndrome, there was the Moscow Signal. Soviet intelligence bathed the U.S. Embassy in Moscow with microwave transmissions. The health effects were similar to what we see today. There are many examples of syndromes and ailments from Americans injured in the line of duty that the government did not recognize for many years, which were eventually proven. Agent Orange used in Vietnam, the Gulf War syndrome, burn pits during the forever wars of Iraq and Afghanistan. In all of these examples, America took too long to acknowledge these injuries, and our service members languished without care. Havana Syndrome is no different. The gaslighting of AHI survivors continues to this day as history repeats itself. Throughout all this, I learned America's best men and women in national security are being targeted and neutralized in a global campaign. AHIs have been reported in the press in every continent except for Antarctica, with a large percentage of these attacks occurring in the homeland, in American, in this town. The impact has been that mission-critical government officials working abroad and at home are being removed from their post with TBIs. Don't take my word for it. Nikolai Patrushev, the secretary of Russia's Security Council, wrote in September 2023, and I quote, "In recent years, hundreds of employees of foreign intelligence services involved in organizing intelligence and subversive activities against our country have been neutralized," end quote. The American people are losing strategic warning and decision-making advantage in great power competition. America's eyes are being blinded, their voices muted, their ears deafened. This is emboldening our other strategic rivals, such as China, and could encourage North Korea and Iran to take similar actions with no repercussions. We collected a large body of data, ranging from signals intelligence to human intelligence to open source reporting and everything in between. Unfortunately, I can't get into specifics based on the classification, but I can tell you, at an early stage, I started to focus on Moscow, and consistently, there was a Russian nexus. Since 2010, the number of counterintelligence incidents began to rise, and so did Russian gray zone activities. These included assassinations, poisonings, sabotage attacks against NATO allies and others, many of which has been documented by Christo. After talking with the survivors who were hit in the US and abroad, I quickly realized these were no longer isolated incidents. There were reports of CI incidents, which included harassment, room intrusions, houses being defiled, tossed, pets poisoned, assaults on our personnel, officers and diplomats being drugged, doxing, families harassed, then an attack via directed energy, a red line to many because of the debilitating nature of these weapons. The U.S. government never hit back, and our nation's hidden heroes continue to be targeted today. Investigators often talk about motive, means, and opportunity. First, let's look at the motive. When President Putin says things like, "If one looks into the security sphere, new physical principles weapons will ensure the security of any country in the near historic perspective." We understand this very well and are working on it. If you know anything about the Russian Ministry of Defense, this is referring to directed energy weapons. Second, the means. Look at the contract for directed energy weapons, which is uncovered by my colleague Christo. Look at the open source photos of Putin awarding scientists prizes for innovation for weapons based on new physical principles. And third is the opportunity. Of course they can do this. As openly reported in 2014, 3 CIA officers were stationed in Ukraine that year during a popular revolt that overthrew Moscow's preferred leader. Later, those CIA officers went on to other assignments and reported AHI attacks, one in Uzbekistan, one is in Vietnam, and the third officer's family hit in London. Despite this large body of data, the ODNI said there's nothing to see here. Everything is dismissed. And last month, the NIH said there's no evidence of physical damage despite all survivors reporting the same symptoms. This same study is now under review for its methodology. I would like to point this committee to the AHI experts panel, whose findings were released in 2022, which saw all the same intelligence and information we did, but came to the opposite conclusion of the DNI. They noted that the signs and symptoms of AHIs are genuine and compelling, and that pulsed electromagnetic energy, particularly in the radio frequency range, explains the core characteristics. I think the bar for AHI attribution was set so high because we do not, as a country and a government, want to face some very hard truths. Can we secure America? Are these massive counterintelligence failures? Can we protect our people on American soil? Is this an act of war? Despite our history of walking away from those who sacrifice for their country, I am optimistic. With congressional support, with your support, and an informed public, it is time to take action. This is a nonpartisan issue which has spanned several administrations. Let's start to get this right with executive and legislative action. First,
and Mr.
please.
Grin, I'm going to go ahead and, if you can wrap up, we'll get to the
Mr. Chairman, could I have 2 more minutes, please? 1 more minute?
1 more minute's fine.
We need to execute existing funding with the Defense Health Program, which was allocated to take care of the survivors and their families. And we should fully implement the Havana Act. And we need a VA diagnostic code, because right now there is none. We need to award Purple Hearts and their civilian equivalents. On the legislative front, we need a new NDAA that covers this and a Havana Act. I would like to thank this committee for their attention in this issue. Thank you to Oriana Zill, Michael Ray, Michael Weiss, and Christo for keeping this issue alive. I urge this committee to take care of our unseen survivors, execute existing funding, and most importantly, pressure the government to fight back. Thank you.
Thank the witness. The chair now recognizes Mr. Grozev for his opening statement of 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear committee members. My interest in investigating the anomalous health incidents occurred at around the time that there was the initial publicity around the Havana cluster. And as a journalist, I just watched from the sidelines and believed that U.S. intelligence and U.S. law enforcement are going to get us the truth. And I was looking forward to that until one day I was approached through a friend, a common friend, by a member of the U.S. intelligence community in Europe who advised me or nudged me or asked me to look into this independently. And I realized that there's something possibly limiting the capabilities or the willingness of U.S. Law enforcement or intelligence to do a thorough study. That's when I started looking into this as my own investigation. And over time, it grew into a multi-country investigation involving Der Spiegel in Germany, The Insider in Russia, and our colleagues from CBS 60 Minutes, with whom we joined hands in 2023. I would like to present a summary of our findings as of this moment, but mind you, our investigation is still in progress. Based on extensive interviews with victims, families, and also analysts who agreed to talk to us, we can now state that to our own comfort and conviction, there is at least 68 incidents that cannot be explained away with psychosomatic symptoms or pre-existing conditions. And we've taken those as the bare minimum that allowed us to create a time-space map. A time-space map that allowed us to geolocate these incidents and further match them to possible travel of potential culprits. And that was an important first part of our investigation. We established that the Russian government, as Lieutenant Colonel Green said, had the long-standing motive and plans to develop something that they call wave weapons. This is a term they use as a catch-all term for both acoustic and directed energy electromagnetic weapons. This has started back in Soviet times. There are several patents that we've reviewed from the 70s. However, the real boost to this program occurred in 2013 when President Putin created a special R&D institute called the Institute for Prospective Military Studies in Russia, which was tasked with, among other things, developing new physical property weapons, including wave energy. We know that there have been many awards issued by this institute, and that they do annual contests, closed-door contests for military engineers providing prototypes and testing data on such weapons. We've obtained documentary evidence that in 2017, a military engineer serving in a commanding position in GRU's clandestine sabotage and assassination unit, known as 29155, was the recipient of the annual award from this institute for a project that was termed Testing Non-Lethal Acoustic Weapons Suitable for Use in Urban Warfare. Notably, this same military commander was immediately promoted to a political position as a personal representative of President Putin in the Far East of Russia. It's a very rare switch in a career of a secret spy in Russia, which is usually given after a kinetic achievement. And there are many examples in the past that I won't go into. Unit 29155 is the most aggressive clandestine sabotage unit of Russian military intelligence that has been responsible, as many of us know, for offensive operations such as the poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal with Novichok, a series of devastating explosions at NATO munition facilities in Europe spanning 2011-2018, the poisoning of 3 Bulgarian people involved with selling weapons to Ukraine, and we've established that spies of this unit, including the commander, Andrei Veryanov, have had sustained communication with military scientists from Russian military institutes, including the Institute for Prospective Studies, but also the 16th Research and Development Institute, with specific competence and background in researching the effect of electromagnetic and acoustic waves on the human brain. We've also established that a medical research facility affiliated with the GRU in St. Petersburg has shown specific interest in researching the effect of ultra and infrasound on the human brain, and a medical facility linked to that particular institute has conducted research in a very rare medical condition known as the Miner syndrome, which we have seen occurring among a subcohort of the actual American victims of AHI. And crucially, we've established that members of this same clandestine unit have traveled extensively around the world under false identities and have been in the proximity of, or within feasible reach, of confirmed AHI incidents in at least 4 cases, including Frankfurt in 2014, China in 2016 and 17, Tbilisi in 21, and further overlaps of people linked to this unit we've seen in Belgrade and Hanoi. The totality of the evidence uncovered by our team has proven that Russia has the motive, the means, and the opportunity to have developed and used non-lethal acoustic or electromagnetic wave weapons against members of the US intelligence and law enforcement community. Members of the unit 29155 were present in locations and at times directly preceding or coinciding with known Havana incidents in at least 4 cases, and there are many more that we're yet to discover. I'll close with just a personal statement. These findings present not a smoking gun, but a very plausible operational theory on the existence, origin, and culprits behind the AHI. I expect the United States intelligence community will address our findings on their substance, on their merit, including providing alternative explanations for why these people, who are known to only engage with kinetic operations, with assassinations, poisoning, explosions, never in intelligence gathering, were at the wrong time, at the wrong place, if they continue to believe that none of this can be attributed to a foreign adversary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Grozev, and the chair now recognizes Mr. Zaid for his opening statement of 5 minutes.
Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today and testify about a topic that has mostly silently plagued our nation's intelligence, diplomatic, military, and law enforcement personnel in some form for decades, and that is anomalous health incidents, or AHIs. I've had the privilege of representing federal AHI victims and their family members for over a decade, years before the issue came to prominence with the 2016 attacks in Havana, Cuba. I now represent more than 24 federal AHI victims, as well as numerous lawful whistleblowers from within CIA, DIA, ODNI, NSA, Departments of State and Commerce, USAID, and the FBI. The victims are not just selfless public servants, but their spouses, children, including infants, and even pets. These criminal attacks have primarily taken place overseas on multiple continents, but have also occurred on our homeland, in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, Florida, and elsewhere. As part of my first case, I was provided an unclassified memorandum by NSA in October 2014, 2 years before Havana, that revealed the existence of intelligence information concerning a foreign adversary, quote, with a high-powered microwave system weapon that may have the ability to weaken, intimidate, or kill an enemy over time and without leaving evidence. The 2012 intelligence information indicated that this weapon is designed to bathe a target's living quarters in microwaves, causing numerous physical effects, including a damaged nervous system, end quote. Today's hearing can only present a sliver of relevant information. The overwhelming majority of evidence concerning AHIs is hidden behind classified walls. Having had authorized access to classified information on this topic, but without revealing that information, it is my view that the executive branch, particularly at the behest of and manipulation by officials within CIA, is not truthfully reporting what it knows. While I commend their acknowledgement that AHI victims are suffering genuine and compelling health effects, I am convinced that the evidence that exists in the classified arena directly contradicts the public conclusions expressed by federal agencies as to the origin, cause, and scope of AHIs. That review of that evidence would lead reasonable people to conclude one or more foreign adversaries are behind at least some of these incidents, and that numerous federal agencies have failed to fully undertake substantive investigations, deliberately delayed collecting or ignored crucial, credible evidence, and have intentionally withheld information even from sister agencies so as to influence and manipulate their decision-making process. There is intelligence, scientific, and medical evidence that substantiates the existence of AHIs and that some of the attacks were perpetrated by a foreign adversary. That evidence can be specifically identified in the proper classified setting. That said, there's a wealth of publicly available information concerning the history of directed energy, and particularly its scientific, intelligence, and military applications. I provide an overview in my written testimony. Given the many years our government has been experimenting with developing directed energy weapons, why would anyone not believe our adversaries are engaged in the same efforts? A recent investigation by 60 Minutes, Der Spiegel, and The Insider identified potential credible links between AHIs and alleged Russian operatives from Military Unit 29155. This included activities within the United States. What was the government's response? CIA doubled down that there was nothing to see, and that it knew of and had already ruled out the same evidence. That is a blatant falsehood that has infuriated many serving members of the intelligence community because so much of the evidence to the contrary is available to them in reports, briefings, and cable traffic. Of course, this evidence is classified. Today's hearing is not going to solve the controversy that AHI presents, but there are many steps that Congress can take. These include ensuring continual and consistent health care for AHI victims, ensuring immediate implementation of and funding for the Havana Act of 2021, as well as amending it where necessary, investigating why law enforcement and other Homeland agencies have not been permitted to pursue AHI leads concerning criminal attacks on American personnel, and instead CIA analysts who do not possess the same skill sets or authorities have been allowed to control the investigations, and require the executive branch to develop comprehensive standard protocols that provide U.S. personnel and their families with guidance as to risks involved and how best to report any incidents. It is time for the U.S. government to be on the right side of history. I welcome the opportunity to try and answer your questions and providing you with classified responses in the proper secure setting.